Fine. Where joining us is Diandra Leslie Pelecky, who has been absent from our show for, I think about a year or so. So it's very glad to have you back, Diandra.
Oh, it's great to be back.
You know, Charlie and I just kind of muddle through this stuff, and we, try to use.
We basically fake it.
Yeah, we use as few facts as we can to, to spew whatever we spew every week. So it's nice to have you on, so we can actually have some basis for what we're trying to say.
Okay.
So with that in mind, let's talk a little bit about the hot topic that we've kind of talked about as well over the last few weeks, and you wrote about, and that's this whole deal about less cautions. And I read your blog post up on building speed, and it's really quite interesting to see that this is not something that's just really happened this year, but it's been a trend over the last few years.
Yeah, in fact, since 2005, the trend for cautions has been decreasing every year.
And the reason for that is, you feel?
Well, I think it actually is just because the drivers are getting better.
Yeah.
If you compare, and I did some detailed statistics. I went through the drivers who had driven in 15 or more races. And if you compare 2011 with 2005, you find that there's about 1,000 more races worth of experience out there in 2011 than there was in 2005. And, you just can't help but get better by doing something.
Well, I guess that leads to the fact that in some kind of, a roundabout way, due to the fact that the economy has not been what it was, I guess you have fewer drivers, new drivers, fewer rookies. I mean, you look at the rookie class for the last few years, and it's almost been non-existent year after year. So I guess it leads to the theory that you're saying is that these guys are, the ones who have rides are sticking around, getting more experience, and there's less newbies showing up every year.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And in fact, I analyzed the data for the Nationwide Series. Same thing.
Diandra, we're talking to Diandra Leslie Pelecky, who's been a contributor to the show in the past, and it's been a little while since we've talked to her. Diandra, Steve and I talked to a friend of ours several weeks ago, who is a veteran crew chief he's crewing in Nationwide Series right now, but he has been a Cup crew chief, Patrick Donahue. And we asked him a question about, what's the most significant, with the cars being as close as they are today, with the crew chiefs and the car chiefs and the engineers not having as much leeway to innovate with a car. Where are they finding their difference? And Patrick told us basically it's either the engine or it's the driver. Can you quantify how much effect the driver has in these deals?
Oh, it's a huge amount, because if you think about it, the driver is the only one who can tell the crew chief what the car is doing. You've got all these people working on developing the car and all these people working on fixing it. The one link is the driver and the crew chief. So if you have a driver and all he can tell you is, this car's crap, I can't drive it, well, how do you fix that?
Right. How do you...
Go ahead.
No, go ahead, finish your thought.
I was going to say, even psychologically, it makes a difference. Elliott Sadler, who moved to the Nationwide Series, if you just listen to him now, he's got a crew chief that really encourages him. And if you listen to how his feedback has changed, it makes a big difference. Same thing with Steve Littart and Dale Earnhardt Jr. Getting that information out of that driver is the most important thing they have to do during a race.
I think it's really kind of, we talked about that as well in weeks gone by, specifically with Junior. And I think early on this year, it might have even been at the end of last year, where Steve Littart told Junior, hey, when you get off the racetrack from practice, you're not in your motor coach. You're not off doing this. You're not doing that. You're here with us trying to get this thing straightened out. And it seems that type of communication is exactly what is leading to, he doesn't have a win, but it seems to be a resurgence of not only the team, but of Junior.
Yeah, that relationship really takes time to develop. You'll hear a crew chief say it's like a marriage, and in a lot of ways it is. You have to figure out when a person says it's really loose, how loose is really? And you'll hear them frequently now using a scale from 1 to 10. That's a way for them to both get on the same page. But it takes time for that to develop. There's a reason why they haven't split up Chad and Jimmy, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, we're talking to Diandra Leslie Pelecky. Diandra, we have drivers and crew chiefs on every week, and a kind of a common comment we hear from the guys when we ask them, what's it going to take to make the racing better, or why was the racing so good at Kansas, or why is the racing not as good as it was at Bristol? It seems to me that the answer more often than not is that they need the tires to go off sooner. Do you agree with that? Do you think if Goodyear would develop a tire that deteriorated sooner but didn't totally go to hell in 30 laps, that it would improve the racing?
Yeah, I was actually talking to Steve Letarte, and that was one of the things he really harped on as being something that really changes how you run the race and separates out a good driver from a less good driver, because some of the drivers do a really good job on tires even when they're starting to go. Other drivers are not so good. When everybody's on brand new grippy tires, it's just two level playing fields.
Right.
Is this car that they're running now, which is going to go away at the end of this year, have they gotten to the point where everything that they could get out of this car, they've gotten out of it, and so therefore there is very little difference amongst the well-funded teams?
Well, NASCAR can always throw new things at the teams. You could go they raised the side skirts and made some suspension changes. They could keep doing that. The problem is that teams get all this information, and then you're asking them to basically take it and toss it and start over. And you can only do that so many times before the teams start going, wait a minute here.
What do you expect for the car of 2013? How long will it take for these guys to get that thing figured out when it finally gets there?
Well, they're involved in the development of it, which is definitely going to help. But you're going to see big differences in probably the first 5 to 10 races between the teams who have hit on something and the teams that are still struggling a bit.
All right. Well, we appreciate you spending some time with us, giving us your opinion from a logic and factual-based perspective, because, as I said earlier, Charlie and I just kind of wing some of this stuff. And,
Mostly.
It's nice to have some data behind us. As a matter of fact, I said last week that I didn't think Jeff Gordon was going to win another race in his career, and I got laughed at, and then I'm listening to the race and watching they're still laughing at me. But I watched the race this last weekend, and he led a fair portion of it, and I was starting to worry about my prognosis. But, you come up with this stuff, and sometimes you hit on it, and sometimes you don't.
That's right. The thing to remember, though, is that there's so much the psychological element that even if you have all the hard data and the engineering, if you've got a driver who doesn't feel he can win, he ain't going to win.
Yep, you're right, Diandra. It's not all science, is it? Thank you very much for your time again this week, and we'll be following your writing. You make us smarter every time we read your stuff. So, thanks a lot.
Well, thank you so much for having me. Let's not make it another year, okay?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks a lot.
Thanks.
Take care.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye now. Diandra Leslie Pelecky, you can read her stuff. Buildingspeed.net is the website, or .org, sorry about that. And read her stuff because, as we said, we make fun of it, but the fact is that she is very, very smart on this stuff from a physics
You're brilliant.
standpoint.
If you want to find out why cars do what they do or why things happen from an engineering standpoint, she's the one to read, because she knows it. I mean, she knows the answers, but she can also communicate it better than anybody I've ever read, except for maybe Hammond. Jeff Hammond's really good at this as well, but Diandra gets into a little bit more of the science than the typical crew chief does. Those guys just know that stuff.
Yeah, they just know it. They don't necessarily know why, but she does. So,
so it's pretty
I know
cool.
during, oil cooler